Now, I wish to read for a text this afternoon just to start off the life story, found over in the book of Hebrews, the 13th chapter. For Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people, with his own blood suffered without the gate. Let us go, therefore, to him without the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. And my thought is that here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. I've stood in Rome, where the great emperors and the cities that they thought they would build immortal, and dig down 20 feet to even find the ruins of it. I've stood where the pharaohs had their great kingdoms, and you dig down in the ground to find where the great pharaohs ruled. All of us like to think about our city and our place, but remember, it cannot stand. When I was a little boy, I used to go to a great maple tree. This great, gigantic tree, it was the most beautiful tree. And I could see its great, mighty branches sway in the wind, great, huge trunk. And I said, you know, I believe that this tree will be here for hundreds and hundreds of years. Not long ago, I took a look at the old tree. It's just a snag. For here we have no continuing city. No, nothing here on the earth that you can look at will continue. It's got to have an end. Everything that's mortal has to give away to an immortality. Now, I used to see my father. He was rather a short, stocky man, very strong. And he was one of the strongest little men that I knew of. And then I remember when Dad used to come in and take his wash for dinner, and he'd roll up his sleeves, them little short, stubby arms. And when he'd pull up his arms to wash, throw the water up on his face, the muscle just wadded in his little arms. And I said, you know, my daddy will live to be 150 years old. He was so strong, but he died at 52. See? Here we have no continuing city. That's right. We cannot continue. Now let's take a little trip, all of us. And it's good to stroll down memory's lane once in a while. Don't you think so? I was born in a little mountain cabin way up in the mountains of Kentucky. They had one room that we lived in, no rug on the floor, not even wood on the floor. It was just simply a bare floor. And a stump, top of a stump cut off with 3 legs on it, that was our table. And all those little Branhams would pile around there and out on the front of the little old cabin and waller down, looked like where a bunch of possums had been wallering. Out there in the dust, you know, all the little brothers, there was 9 of us. And 1 little girl. And Mother was 15 years old when I was born. Dad was 18. And I was the first of the 9 children. And they told me that the morning I was born, now we was very poor, just the poorest of poor. And we did not even have a window in this little cabin. It had like a little wooden door that you open. I doubt whether you ever seen anything like that. A little wooden door that opens instead of a window. You keep it open in the daytime, you closed it at night. We couldn't turn on the electric lights or even burn kerosene in those days. We had what you call a grease lamp. And I was born on April the 6th, 1909. Of course, you know that makes me a little over 25 now. And so the morning that I was born, Mother said that they opened up the window. Now, we had no doctors. There was a midwife. And that midwife was my grandmother. And so when I was born and my first beginning to cry, and Mother wanted to see her child, and And when they opened up the little window just at the break of day, about 5 o'clock, and there was an old robin sitting by the side of a little bush. Did you ever hear the legend of the robin, how he got his red breast? There was the King of Kings was dying one day on the cross. And he was suffering, and no one would come to him. He had no one to help him. And there was a little brown bird wanted to take them nails out of the cross. And he kept flying into the cross and jerking on those nails. He was too little to pull them out. And he got his little breast all red with blood. Ever since then, his breast has been red. He was sitting at the side of the window, chirping as the robins sing, and Dad pushed back the window. And when they pushed the little window door back, that light that you see in the picture come whirling in the window. Says my mother, and hung over the bed. Grandmother didn't know what to say. Now was not a religious family. And then when they opened this window and this light stood in there, they did not know what to do. Dad had bought him, Mama said, a new pair of overalls for this event. He's standing with his arms in the bib of the old overalls like the woodsmen and loggers used in those days, and it frightened them. Well, after I'd got up maybe 10 days old or something, they'd taken me up to a little Baptist church called Possum Kingdom. And the old preacher came by, and there he offered prayer for me as a little boy. That was my first trip to church. At the year of about something a little over 2 years old, the first vision taking place. Well, they had told around in the mountains there that this light came in, so they tried to figure it up. Some of them said it must have been the sunlight reflecting on a mirror in the house, but there was no mirror in there, and the sun wasn't up. So it was too early at 5 o'clock. And then, they just passed it by, and when it's about supposed to be near 3 years old, now I have to be honest. There's things here that I do not like to say. And I wish I could bypass it and not have to say it, but yet to tell the truth, you must tell the truth. If it's on yourself or your people, be honest about it, then it's always the same. My father was a long way from being a religious person. He was a typical mountain boy that drank constantly all the time. And he had gotten in some trouble in a fight. He could not come back because the law was looking for him. And then when we'd heard from him by letter, signed by another name, but that he had told Mother how it would be, that she'd hear from him. And then I remember one day, the spring, this little cabin was just behind the house, and during that time, after there's 11 months difference between me and my next brother. And he was still crawling, and I had a big rock in my hand, and I was trying to show him how hard I could throw this rock. And the old mud where the spring had run out of the ground and made the muddy ground. And I heard a bird, and it was singing up in a tree. And I looked up to that tree, and the bird flew away. And when it did, a voice spoke to me. Now, I know you think I could not think and remember that, but the Lord God who judged the earth and the heavens and all there is knows that I'm telling the truth. That bird, when it flew away, a voice came from where the bird was in the tree like a wind caught in the bush, and it said, "You'll live near a city called New Albany." And I've lived from the time I was 3 years old until this time within 3 miles of New Albany, Indiana. I went in and told my mother about it. Well, she thought I was just dreaming or something. Later we moved to Indiana, and Father went to work for a man, Mr. Wathen, a rich man. And Dad, being a poor man, yet he could not do without his drinking, so he went to making whiskey in a still. And then it worked a hardship on me because I was the oldest of the children, I had to come and pack water to this still to keep those coils cool while they were making the whiskey. Then he got to selling it, and then he got 2 or 3 of those stills. Now that's the part I don't like to tell, but it's the truth. And I remember one day from the barn coming up to the house crying because out at the back of the place was a pond. One day packing water from back out at this pump, which was about a city block, I was squalling to who wouldn't have it because I'd come from school and all the boys went out to the pond fishing. I just loved to fish. And so they all got to go fishing but me, and I had to pack water for this still. Of course, that had to be Mom is prohibition. And it was such a hardship. And I stopped under this tree, and I was sitting there just squalling. It was in September. Because I wanted to go fishing, I had to pack several tubs of water with little molasses buckets, just about that high, half a gallon, because it's just a little lad of about 7 years old. And I'd pour them in a big tub and then go back and get another 2 buckets and come back pumping it. That's the water we had. And there's going to run off a batch of that corn whiskey that night. These men with Daddy up at the house. And I was crying, and all at once I heard something making a noise like a whirlwind, something like this. Now I hope it isn't too loud, going, just a noise like that. And I heard that noise, and I looked around. It's just as quiet as it is in this room. Not a leaf blowing nowhere, nothing. And I thought, where's that noise coming from? Well, I thought it must be away from here, just a lad, and it got louder and louder. I picked up my little buckets and squalled a couple more times and started up the lane. I was resting, and I got just a few feet from that, out from under the branches of this big tree, and oh my, it made a whirl sounding. Well, I started up the lane again, and I turned to look at this again. And when it did, a human voice, just as audible as mine is, said, don't you never drink, smoke, or defile your body in any way. There'll be a work for you to do when you get older. Why, it like to scared me to death. You can imagine how a little fella felt. I dropped those buckets and home I went just as hard as I could go, screaming the top of my voice, and there was copperheads in that country, snakes, and they're very poisonous. Mother thought, coming alongside the garden, I'd perhaps got my foot on a copperhead, and she ran to meet me, and I jumped up in her arms, screaming, hugging her, kissing her, and she said, what's the matter? Did you get snake bit? Looked me all over. I said, no, Mama, there's a man in that tree down there. Told me not to drink and not to smoke. Drink whiskeys and things, and I was packing water to a moonshine still right then. And it said, don't you never drink or defile your body in any way. That's immoral, you know, and my child, young manhood with women. And to my best, I have never one time been guilty of such. The Lord help me of those things, and as you go along, you'll find out. So then, don't drink or don't smoke or do not defile your body, for there will be a work for you to do when you get older. And then sometime about a month after that, I was playing marbles out with my little brothers out in the front yard, and all at once I had a strange feeling come on me. And I stopped and sat down on the side of the tree, and we were right up on the bank from the Ohio River. And I looked down towards Jeffersonville, and I seen a bridge rise up and go across the river, span the river, and I seen 16 men, I counted them, had dropped off of there and lost their lives on that bridge. I run in real quick and told my mother, and she thought I went to sleep, but they kept it in mind. And 22 years, the man, the municipal bridge, now it's many of you cross when you cross there, crossed the river at the same place, and 16 men lost their lives building that bridge across the river. It's never failed to be perfectly true. As you see it here in the auditorium, it's been that way all the time. Then I remember coming on up, I got to be a young man. When I got to be a young man, I had ideas like all young men. Going to school, I found them little girls, you know, I was real bashful, you know, and I finally got me a little girlfriend. And another little boy, we were buddies, so he got his daddy's old Model T Ford, and we got a date with our girls, and we was going to take them out. Right. And so I had a few nickels in my pocket, and we stopped at a little place and you could get a ham sandwich for a nickel. And so, I was rich. I could buy 4 of them, see? And after we'd eat the sandwiches and drink the Coke, I started taking the bottles back. And to my surprise, when I come out, women had just started falling from grace at that time, or from womanhood. My little dove was smoking a cigarette. Well, I've always had my opinion of a woman that would smoke a cigarette, and I haven't changed it one bit from that time on. That's right. It's the lowest thing she can do. Well, when I seen that pretty little girl just acting smart, this cigarette in her hand, that like to kill me, because I really thought I loved her. Later on, I found the girl when I was about 22 years old. She was a darling. She was a girl that went to church, German Lutheran. Her name was Brombach, and she was a nice girl. She didn't smoke or drink or she didn't dance or anything. A nice girl. So when we got married, we didn't have nothing go housekeeping. I think I had $2 or $3. So we rented a house. It cost us $4 a month. It was a little old 2-room place. We set up housekeeping. I remember taking and painting a shamrock on the chairs when I painted them. And, we were happy. We had one another, so that's all necessary. God, by His mercy and His goodness, was the happiest little couple could be on the earth. I found this, that happiness does not consist of how much of the world's good you own, but how contented you are with the portion that's allotted to you. And after a while, God came down and blessed our little home. We had a little boy. His name was Billy Paul. And a little later from that, about 11 months, He blessed us again with a little girl called Sharon Rose, taken from the word of the Rose of Sharon. And I remember one day I had saved up my money, and I was going to take a little vacation, going up to a place, Papaw Lake, to fish. And on my road back, and during this time, I'm leaving out my conversion. I was converted and was ordained by Dr. Roy Davis in the Missionary Baptist Church, and had become a minister and have the tabernacle that I now preach in Jeffersonville. And I was pastoring the little church, and no money. I pastored the church 17 years and never got one penny. I didn't believe in there wasn't even an offering plate in it. And what tithings I had from work and so forth, had a little box on the back of the building, said, little sign on it, insomuch as you have done unto the least of these my little ones, you have did it unto me. And then that's how the church was paid for. We had 10 years loan to pay it, and was paid off less than 2 years. And I never took an offering of no kind. And I remember when she worked so hard to help me to have enough money to go up to this lake to fish. And when I was coming back from the lake, and I began to notice cars that had signs on the back that said Jesus only. And I followed some of them down, and I come to a great big church, and I found out they were Pentecostal. I'd heard of Pentecostal, but they were a bunch of holy rollers. They laid on the floor and frothed at their mouth and everything that they told me about. So I didn't want nothing to do with it. So I heard them all carrying on in there, and I thought, I believe I'll just walk in. So I stopped my old Ford and walked in, and all the singing you ever heard in your life. Well, I listened to some of their teachers. They were standing there, they were teaching about Jesus and how great He was and how great everything was, and about a baptism of the Holy Ghost. I thought, what are they talking about? But you know, something about it, longer I sit there, the better I liked it. There was something seemed to be real good. And that night, I prayed for her all night. I said, Lord, what is this I got into? I never seen such religious people in my life. And I said, help me to know what this is all about. And the next morning, I got down there and invited us for breakfast. Of course, I wouldn't come eat with him because I had nothing to put in the offering. And he said, last night on the platform, there was a young preacher here, a Baptist and said he was the youngest preacher on the platform. His name was Branham. Does anybody know any whereabouts of him? Tell him to come on, we want him to bring the morning message. I stood up there, I said, well, I don't know about this. I was fumbling real nervous, you know, and I got over here around Luke 16, and I thought, well, and I got on the subject, and he lifted up his eyes in hell and cried. Then I cried. Something got a hold of me. My, oh my. I don't know what happened. But when I kind of got to myself, I was standing on the outside. Then people got screaming and shouting and crying, and we had an awful time. When I come outside, there's a fellow walked up to me with a great big Texas hat on, big boots. Walked up and said, I'm Elder so-and-so. Said, why don't you come down to Texas and hold me a revival? Let me put that down, mister. I put it down like that. Here come a fellow up with one of these little kind of a golf trousers on, where he used to play golf, you know, they had them little blouse thing. He said, I'm Elder so-and-so from Miami. I'd like to... all right, so I grabbed these things, and home I went. Wife met me, and she said, why you sound so happy about Billy? I said, oh, I met the cream of the crop. My, it's the best you ever seen. Them people ain't ashamed of their religion, and oh, I told her all about it. I said, and looky here, honey, a whole string of invitations. Them people. He said, they're not holy rollers, are they? I said, I don't know what kind of rollers they are, but they got something that I needed. Never heard such in my life. I said, will you go with me? She said, honey, when I married you, I will stick with you until death shall separate us. She said, I'll go. She said, I will tell the folks. And so Miss Brumback asked for me to come up. Well, she said, what's this you're talking about? She said, the very idea. Do you think you'd drag my daughter out amongst stuff like that? Said, ridiculous, that's nothing but trash that the other churches have thrown out. I said, but you know, Miss Brumback, down in my heart, I feel that the Lord wants me to go with them people. She said, you go back up to your church until they're able to afford a parsonage for you and act like a man's got some sense. Said, you're not taking my daughter out through there. I said, yes, ma'am. I turned around, walked out, and Hope started crying. She came out, she said, Billy, regardless of what Mama says, I'll stay with you. Bless her heart. And I said, oh, that's all right, honey. And I just let it go. She wouldn't let her daughter go with such people as that because it wasn't nothing but trash. And so I just kind of let it go. It's the worst mistake I ever made in my life. One of the worst. There come up a flood in 1937. There came a flood. And I was on patrol at that time, and I was trying my best to bring the people out of the flood houses, tearing down, and my own wife took sick, and she was real sick with pneumonia. And they took her out to the regular hospital so full we couldn't put her in there, so we take her out to the government where they had a room out there. And so then they called me back out, and I always lived on the river and quite a boatman. So I was trying to get the people, rescue them from the flood. And then they called me, said, there's a house over on Chestnut Street's about ready to go in. There's a mother and a bunch of children in there. Said, if you think your motor can get into them. I said, well, I'll do all I can. And I shooting those waves, the dike had broke up there, and oh my, they were just washing the city out. And I would give it all the juice that I could, and finally down across the alleys and through the places. And I got there close to where the old levee was, the water pouring through, and I heard someone scream, and I seen a mother stand out on the porch. There's them big rollers going through like that. Well, I went on up this way as far as I could and hit the stream and come back and got on that side. I got my boat stopped just in time to tie it around the pillar of the post of the door, post or porch post. And I run in and grabbed the mother and got her in there, 2 or 3 of the children, and I undone my boat and got her back, come out way down below and got her over to the shore, about a mile and a half across the city. So I got her to the shore, and then when I got over there, she fainted, and she began screaming, my baby, my baby. Well, I thought that she meant she left the baby in the house. Ooh, I tucked back again while they were trying to take care of her, and I come to find out she was won't know where her baby was there. There was a little fellow about 3 years old, and I thought she meant a little nursing baby or something. And so I tucked back and got over there, and when I got that boat and got on the inside and couldn't find old baby, and the porch gave away, and the house went in. And I run real quick and grabbed the piece there that was floating my boat, got into the boat and pulled that and loosened it up, and it done got me out into the current of the main river then. It was about 11:30 at night, and it's sleeting and snowing, and I grabbed a hold of the starter string, and I tried to pull the boat, and it wouldn't start, and I tried, and it wouldn't start, and I tried again, getting farther in that current, the ball's just below me. And I was trying real hard, and I thought, oh my, here's my end. This is it. And I'd try real hard, and I said, Lord, please don't let me die a death like this. I'd pull, and it'd come back to me. What about that bunch of trash that you wouldn't go to? I put my hand back on the boat, and I said, God be merciful to me. Don't let me leave my wife and baby like this. And I'm out there sick, please. And I just kept pulling like that, and it wouldn't start, and I could hear the roaring down there, because just a few minutes, and oh my, that would be it. And I said, Lord, if you'll forgive me, I promise you I'll do anything. And kneeling in that boat there, and the sleet hit me in the face, I said, I'll do anything that you want me to do. And I pulled again, and it started. And I turned all the gas on it I could, and finally got into the shore, and I went back to find the truck, patrol truck, and I thought some of them said, say, the government just washed away my wife and baby in there. Both babies. And I took out for the government as hard as I could. The water was standing about 15 feet deep all through it. And there was a major there, and I said, Major, what happened to the hospital? He said, now don't be worried. Do you have anyone in there? I said, yes, a sick wife and 2 babies. He said they all got out, so they're in a freight car, and they've headed towards Charleston. I got my boat and got my car and my boat in the back of it and run out there and then the creeks had come down about 2.5 or 3 miles wide. All night long I tried to, some of them said the freight car washed off the tracks out there on the trestle. Well, to find myself marooned out on a little island and sat there 3 days. I had plenty of time to think about whether that was trash or not. Just beating, where's my wife? Finally, when I found her, and a few days after I got out and got across, she was way up to Columbus, Indiana, in the Baptist auditorium where they'd made a hospital-like sick rooms on little government cots. And I ran to her as hard as I could, trying to find where she was, screaming, hope, hope, hope. And I looked, and there she was laying on a cot, and TB had set in. She raised her little bony hand, and she said, Billy. And I run to her, and I said, Hope, honey. She said, I look awful, don't I? I said, no, honey, you look all right. For about 6 months, we worked with everything that was in us to try to save her life, but she kept getting lower, lower. One day I was on patrol, and I had my radio turned on, and I thought, I heard him say, make a call on the radio, said, for William Branham, wanted the hospital at once, wife dying. I rushed back to the hospital as quick as I could, turned on the red light and the siren and took off. And then I got up at the hospital, and I stopped running, coming down through the hospital. I seen a little buddy of mine that we fished together, we run together as boys, Sam Adair. And so then here he come out like that, and had his hat in his hand. He looked at me and he just started crying. And I run up to him, throw my arms around him, he put his arms around me, he said, Billy, she's going. He said, I'm sorry, I've done all I could do, I've had specialists and everything. I said, Sam, surely she's not going. He said, yeah, she's going. And he said, don't go in there, Bill. And I said, I've got to go in, Sam. He said, don't do it, please don't. I said, let me go in. He said, I'll go with you. I said, no, you stay out here. I want to stay with her in her last minute. I walked in the room, and the nurse was sitting there, and she was crying because she and Hope was schoolmates together. And so I looked over, and she started crying, put her hand up, started walking over. I looked over and shook her. There she was. She went down from about 120 pounds to about 60. And I shook her. And if I live to be 100 years old, I'll never forget what happened. She turned over, and those great, big, pretty eyes looked up at me. She smiled. She said, why did you call me back, Billy? I said, honey, I just got the cast. I had to work. We was way in debt and hundreds of dollars a doctor bill and nothing to pay it with, and I just had to work. And I'd seen her 2 or 3 times a day and every night. And then when she was in that condition, I said, What do you mean call you back? She said, Bill, you've preached about it, you've talked about it, but you don't have no idea what it is. I said, what are you talking about? She said, heaven. She said, look, she said, I was being escorted home by some people's man or women or something that was dressed in white. And she said, I was at ease and peace. She said, big pretty birds flying from tree to tree. She said, don't think I'm beside myself. She said, Billy, I'm going to tell you our mistake. She said, sit down. I didn't. I knelt down. Took her hand. She said, you know where our mistake is? And I said, yes, sweetheart, I do. She said, we should have never listened to Mama. Them people were right. I said, I know it. She said, promise me this, that you'll go to those people. Said, because they're right. And she said, raise my children like that. She said, I want to tell you something. She said, I'm dying. I said, I don't dread going. Said, it's beautiful. She said, the only thing I hate to leave you, Bill. And I know you got these two little children to raise. She said, promise me that you'll not stay single and let my children be pulled about from pillar to post. That's a sensible thing for a 21-year-old mother. And I said, I can't promise that, Hope. She said, please promise me. Said, one thing I want to tell you. Said, you remember that rifle? I'm just crazy about guns. And she said, you wanted to buy that rifle that day and you didn't have enough money to make the down payment? I said, yes. She said, I've been saving my money, my nickels, to try to make that down payment on that rifle for you. She said, now when this is over, you go back home, look up on the duofold, or the folding bed, under that piece of paper on top, and you'll find the money there. She said, promise me that you'll buy that rifle. You don't know how I felt when I seen that $1.75 in nickels laying there. I got the rifle. And she said, now don't live single. And she said, she didn't know that what was fixing to happen in a few hours, man. And I held her darling hands while the angels of God packed her away. I went home. I didn't know what to do. I laid down there at night, and I heard, I think a little mouse was in the old grate where we had some papers in there, and I shut the door with my foot in there, hung her kimono on the back, laying down there in the morgue. And just in a little bit, someone called me, said, Billy, this Brother Frank Roy said, your baby's dying. Said, Doc's up there now, and said she's got tubercular meningitis. She nursed it from her mother. And said she's dying. I got in the car, went up there, and there she was, a sweet little thing, and they rushed her to the hospital. I went out to see him. Sam come up and said, Billy, don't you go in that room. You got to think of Billy Paul. Said she's dying. I said, Doc, I got to see my baby. He said, no, you can't go in. Said she's got meningitis, Billy. You'd pack it to Billy Paul. I waited till he got out. I couldn't stand to see her die and her mother laying down there in the undertaker's establishment. I tell you, the way of a transgressor is hard. And I went, slipped in the door, and when Sam went out, the nurse went out, I went out into the basement. It's a little bitty hospital. She's in an isolated place, and the flies is in her little eyes. They had a little, what we call a mosquito bar, a little netting over her eyes. And she was a little spasm, her little fat leg was moving up and down like that, and her little hands with that spasm. I looked at her, and she's just big enough to be cute, about 8 months old. And her mother used to set her out there with her little 3 corners on, you know, in the yard when I'd come up and I'd toot the horn, and she'd go goo, 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 reaching for me, you know. There laid my darling dying. I looked down to her and I said, Sherry, you know Daddy? You know Daddy, Sherry? And when she looked, she was suffering so hard that one of them pretty little blue eyes had crossed. It like to tore my heart out of me. I knelt down, I said, Lord, what have I done? Have not I preached the gospel on the street corners? I've done everything that I know to do. Don't hold it against me. I never call them people trash. It was her that called them people trash. I said, I'm sorry it all happened. Forgive me. Don't take my baby. And while I was praying, looked like a sheet or cloth come down, I knowed he had refused me. Now there was the hardest and the most treacherous time of my life. When I raised up and looked at her, and I thought, Satan put in my mind, well, you mean as hard as you've preached and the way that you've lived, and now when it comes to your own baby, he'll turn you down. I said, that's right. If he can't save my baby, then I can't. I stopped. I just didn't know what to do. And then I said this, I said, Lord, you gave her to me and you taken her away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. If you take even me, I'll still love you. And I put my hand over on her and I said, bless you, sweetheart. Daddy wanted to raise you with all my heart. I wanted to raise you and raise you to love the Lord. But the angels are coming for you, sweetheart. Daddy will take your little body down and lay it on the arms of Mama. I'll bury you with her. Someday Daddy will meet you. You just wait up there with Mama. When her mother was dying, she said, last word she said, Bill, stay on the field. I said, she said, if I'm on the field when he comes, I'll get the kids and meet. If I'm not, I'll be buried by you. And you go over on the right-hand side of the great gate, and when you see all of them come in, stand there and start hollering, Bill, 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 just as loud as you can. I'll meet you there. I kissed her goodbye. I'm on the battlefield today. That's been nearly 20 years ago. I got my date with my wife. I'm going to meet her. I took the little baby when it died and put it on the arms of the mother, and we take it out to the cemetery. And I stood there to hear Brother Smith, the Methodist preacher that preached the funeral. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. And I thought, heart to heart. There she went. Not long after that, I took little Billy there one morning. He's just a little bitty feller. He said something there like to kill me one afternoon. He was crying. It was long, late in the evening. And I was patting him on my back, patting him on my shoulder, patting him like this. He said, Daddy, please go get Mama and bring her here. And I said, honey, I can't get Mama. Jesus. I said, well, tell Jesus to send me my Mama. I want her. I said, well, honey, me and you go see her sometime. And he stopped and said, Daddy. And I said, yeah. He said, I see Mama up there on that cloud. Like to kill me. I thought, I see Mama up there on that cloud. I just almost fainted. I hugged the little fella up to my bosom like that, just held my head down, went on in. Days passed. I couldn't forget it. I tried to work, couldn't go back home. It wasn't home no more. I wanted to stay. We didn't have nothing but just that old tore up furniture, but it was something that she and I had enjoyed together. It was home. And I remember one day I was trying to work in public service. I went up to fix an old secretary was hanging down. It was real early in the morning, and I climbed up this cross, and I couldn't get that baby up. I could see my wife going, but that baby going, just a little bitty thing. And I was on there and I was singing, on the hill far away stood an old rugged cross, and the primaries run down to the transformer and went out into, secondary. And I was hanging up there on it, and I happened to look at the sun coming up behind me, and there my hand stretched out, and the sign of that cross on the hillside. I thought, yes, it was my sins that put him there. I said, Sharon, honey, Daddy wants to see you so bad, honey. I would like to hold you in my arms again, you darling little thing. I got beside myself. It had been weeks. I pulled off my rubber glove. There's 2,300 volts running right beside of me. I pulled off my rubber glove. I said, God, I hate to do this. I'm a coward. But Sherry, Daddy's going to see you and Mommy just in a few minutes. Started pulling off my glove to put my hand on that 2,300 and break it. Why, you even have no blood left in you. And so I started pulling that glove off, and something happened. When I come to, I was sitting on the ground with my hands up like this to my face, crying. It was God's grace, or I would have been having a healing service here. I'm sure of that. It was Him protecting His gift, not me. I started home. I quit. Put my tools away and went back. I said, I'm going home. I started around the house, and I picked up the mail in the house, kind of cold, and I went in. We had one little room. I was sleeping on a little cot there, and the frost coming up, and that old stove. I took the mail, and I looked in the mail, and the first thing on there was her little Christmas saving, 80 cents. Miss Sharon Rose Branham. There it was all over again. I'd been game warden. I reached in there and got my gun, pistol, out from the holster. I said, Lord, I can't go this anymore. I'm dying. I'm so tormented. I pulled the hammer back on the gun, put it up to my head, kneeling there on that cot in that dark room. I said, Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thine will be done. As I tried, I squeezed that trigger as hard as I could. I said, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And it wouldn't go off. I thought, oh God, are you just tearing me to pieces? What have I done? You won't even let me die. And I threw the gun down and went off and shot through the room. I said, God, why can't I die and get out of it? I just can't go no farther. You've got to do something to me. And I fell over and started crying on my little old dirty bunk there. And I must have went to sleep. I don't know whether it was asleep or what happened. And I thought I was going down along through the prairie, singing that song. There's a wheel on the wagon is broken, sign on the ranch for sale. As I went along, I noticed an old covered wagon, like an old prairie schooner, and the wheel was broke. Of course, that represented my broken family. And as I got close, I looked, and there stood a real pretty young girl, about 20 years old, white flowing hair and blue eyes, dressed in white. I looked over at her. I said, how do you do? Went on. She said, hello, Dad. And I turned back and I said, Dad? Well, I said, how, miss, can I be your daddy when you're as old as I am? She said, Daddy, you just don't know where you're at. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, this is heaven. Said, on earth I was your little Sharon. Well, I said, honey, you was just a little baby. Said, Daddy, little babies are not little babies. Sure, they're immortal. They never get old or never grow. And I said, oh, Sharon, honey, you're a pretty young woman. She said, Mama's waiting for you. And I said, where? She said, up at your new home. And I said, new home? Branhams are vagabonds. They don't have homes. They just... And I said, well, I never had a home, honey. She said, but you got one up here, Daddy. I don't mean to be a baby, but it's just so real to me. As I start to thinking of it, it all comes back again. She said, you got one here, Daddy. I know I got one over there. Someday I'll go to it. She said, where's Billy Paul, my brother? I said, well, I left him at Miss Broy's just a few minutes ago. Said, Mother wants to see you. And I turned and looked, and there was great big palaces, and the glory of God coming up around him, and I heard an angelic choir singing, my home, sweet home. I started up a long steps running just as hard as I could, and when I got to the door, there she stood, a white garment on, that black hair long, holding down her back. She raised out her arms as she always did when I come home tired from work or something. I caught her by the hands and I said, honey, I seen Sharon down there. I said, she made a pretty girl, didn't she? She said, yes, Bill. She said, Bill, put her arms around me, and she said, just around my shoulders. She started patting me. She said, stop worrying about me and Sharon. I said, honey, I can't help it. She said, now Sharon and I are better off than you are. And said, don't worry about us no more. Will you promise me? And I said, I said, I've been so lonesome for you. And for Sharon, and Billy cries all the time for you. I said, I don't know what to do with him. And she said, it'll be all right, Bill. She said, just promise me you won't weary no more. And she said, won't you sit down? And I looked around, and there's a great big chair. And I remember I tried to buy a chair. I tried to buy a chair one time. We just had them old common wooden bottom chairs for that breakfast set. We had to use them, the old chairs we had. And we could buy one of these chairs that let back in the back like I forget what kind of easy rest chair. And it cost $17. You could pay $3 down and $1 a week. And we got one. And when I come in, I'd work all day and preach till midnight around the streets and wherever I could preach. And one day, I got behind on my payments. We couldn't make it. And it got day after day. And finally, one day, they come and got my chair. Took it. That night, I never will forget, she had me a cherry pie baked, poor little old thing. She knew I was going to be disappointed. And after supper, I said, what's you so good about tonight, honey? And she said, say, I had the boys over in the neighborhood to dig you some fishing worms. Don't you think we ought to go down to the river and fish a little while? And I said, yes, but... And she started crying. I knew there was something wrong. I had an idea, because it already sent me a notice it's coming to get it. We couldn't make that $1 payment a week. We couldn't afford it. She put her arms around me, and I went to the door, and my chair was gone. She told me up there, she said, you remember that chair, Bill? And I said, yes, honey, I remember. So that's what she's thinking about, wasn't it? Yeah. I said, well, they won't take this one. This one's paid for. She said, sit down just a minute, I want to talk to you. And I said, honey, I don't understand this. And she said, promise me, Billy, promise me that you won't worry anymore. You're going back now. I said, promise me you won't worry. And I said, I can't do that. And just then I come to. It was dark in the room. I looked around and I felt her arm around me. I said, oh, are you here in the room? Started patting me. She said, you gonna make me that promise, Bill? Promise me you won't weary no more? I said, I promise you. And then she patted me 2 or 3 times, and she was gone. I jumped up and turned on the light, looked everywhere. She was gone. But she's just gone out of the room. She isn't gone, she's still living. She was a Christian. Billy and I went to the grave here some time ago, packing a little flower for his mother and sister, just on an Easter morning, and we stopped. The little fellow started crying. He said, Daddy, my mom is down there. I said, no, honey, no, she ain't down there. Sister ain't down there. We got a folded over grave here, but way across the sea there's an open grave where Jesus rose, and someday he'll come, he'll bring Sister and Mama with him. I'm on the battlefield today, friends. I just can't tell anymore. God bless you. Let's bow our heads a minute. Oh, Lord. Many times, Lord, I'm sure people don't understand when they think these things come easy. But there's a great day coming when Jesus shall come and all these sorrows will be wiped away. I pray, Heavenly Father, that you help us to be prepared. And that last promise when I kissed her on the cheek that morning and I'd meet her there that day, I believe she'll be standing at that post screaming my name. I've lived true to that promise since, Lord. Around the world, in all kinds of places, trying to bring the gospel. Getting old now, tired and wore out. One of these days I'm going to close this Bible for the last time. God, keep me faithful to the promise. Keep your grace around me, Lord. Let me not look at the things of this life, but live for the things that's beyond. Help me to be honest. I don't ask for a flower bed of ease. No, Lord, when my Christ died there under suffering, and all the rest of them died like that. I don't ask for any easy thing. Just let me be honest, Lord, truthful. Let people love me so I can lead them to Thee. I pray that Your mercies rest upon each of us here, and those who are here, Lord, may not even know You, and maybe they've got some little loved one across the sea yonder. If they've never fulfilled their promise, may they do it now, Lord. Excuse my breaking down, but oh my, you don't realize, friend. You don't know what sacrifice. That's not a spot hardly of the life story.